What's up, producers? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to talk about clipping versus limiting. Clipping and limiting are both tools that basically cap your loudness, so different ways to make stuff loud and to control the volume of things. With that being said, they're totally different, and I use them in two totally different ways when I'm producing. So we're going to go over basically what each of them do and how to use both of them. Before we hop in, I have some dope news for you guys. I just dropped my EDM course. It is fire. I've been working on it for a year. It has everything you're ever going to need to know about making bangers start to finish. And it's super, super affordable. So if that's something you're interested in, it is linked in the description. Definitely worth checking out. Let's hop into the video. Both of these methods will stop sounds completely once they reach a threshold. So remember, with a compressor, the sound would go up and then it would turn it down a certain amount based on how far past the threshold it was. So if beyond the threshold is a 1-to-2 ratio, it would turn it down that much. Now with clipping and a limiter, now it's going to completely turn it down when it reaches an area, more or less. These are both great for loudness and mastering. So there's typically a lot of limiters involved in the mastering process. Limiting and clipping can make something sound super loud. There's a caveat with clipping is now you have that clipped signal. And they're similar to compression, but they're way more aggressive, basically. So here's kind of like a visual demonstration of limiting versus clipping. So basically what's happening is when you're limiting, your sound is going up and it is reaching a threshold, usually at 0, because usually when we're limiting, we're trying to hit 0 dB without going over and causing noise and distortion. So we get to this point right up here, and then it turns it down in a fashion of compression. So you still have that nice curve. It's not causing any noise. It's just as soon as it's coming up here, it's saying, nope, turning it down, and then it goes back down. So limiting most of the time is transparent. So it's not something that's really meant to be heard. It's more so just to make stuff loud. And again, it'll look just like a compressor. It'll decrease the dynamics a little bit. Whereas clipping, what's happening with clipping is it's getting to the threshold and then it's just literally just chopping it off. So you have this straight line here. And so what's happening with your speakers, like we can see up here, is limiting. This is your sound playing normal, limited, compressed, whatever. So the speaker is going out and then it's coming back in. So this is what's happening to the speaker cone when music's playing. It's vibrating, so causing it to generate sound. With a clipper, it's pushing the speaker up to a certain point, and then the speaker, instead of going like this, going up and down, it's staying there for like a millisecond and going back down. So the speaker is pushed out longer, and that's what's creating both the noise and the excessive loudness of clipping. So again, clipping chops off audio to achieve a louder sound. It can be an aesthetic of a system kind of being pushed to the limits, and it's more aggressive and colored. So here's some examples of when you've more or less heard clipping as an aesthetic somewhere. So this is actually like one of my favorite producers. His name's Jestik, and kind of his thing is like clipping. So first off, let's look at this waveform here. It's super clipped. So like, it's literally, they call this a stick of butter. So there's like no dynamics at all. Everything is just slammed to the ceiling. And that's kind of the trade-off with clipping and limiting is now you're taking away from that dynamic range. So you're taking away from the changes of the quietest to the loudest sound. But it can work in some situations. So like this dude pulls it off really good. And it's an art form. Clipping isn't just like jam your stuff into a clipper. It definitely is an art form. So where's a good one where he clips really heavily? So this is kind of like, in my opinion, clipping at its finest. Like it's adding all that color to the sound. It's super loud, but it still bounces. It's still got dynamics somehow. It's emulating a speaker clipping, but it's not actually clipping. So I can't find an example right now, but this is also a thing on TikTok or like social media where they play a song and then all of a sudden it's like super clipped and super heavy. It's usually meant to portray something that's like super big. Here's another example that I kind of stumbled across recently. It's a pretty weird song, but it's a really good example of clipping. So like pay attention to the sub bass.
Hey man, where the fuck is Mario Judah?
I'm a big dog, big bear, nigga, I'm a lion. I'm the predator of the prey that is hiding. Oh my, I have found you.
So yeah, really weird song. But when we hear that kick and that sub hit, if you're like in your car, you would almost think that your system is clipping. You would think that the speaker is like being pushed to a point where it's clipping. but it's literally just an aesthetic that they use. They do it a lot in trap music and like hyperpop too. So it is, especially now in today's music, it's very much so as an aesthetic. So again, limiting is basically a brick wall compressor. So it adds loudness, but is still transparent. So let's look at a couple examples of these. This is a fun one to look at. So if we were gonna like say theoretically this wasn't mastered, we were gonna like finish it, we will do a full-on like mastering tutorial towards the end. So I'll really get into detail of like how to use limiters in mastering and what series and how many and all that. But best transparent limiter on the market is Big Surprise FabFilter Pro L. So you really can't hear it, and you could really kind of just jam your audio to the ceiling, so 0 dB, and get your track super loud without really sacrificing any of like the sound quality. Revisiting our compressor, same thing. So anytime it's hitting the threshold, it's turning it down. Only difference is it's by an infinity to 1 ratio. So it's not letting anything pass this line. See, we're pushing it to the limit here. And if we look at a meter, the true peak is at 0. So it's absolutely at 0 dB, as loud as it can get. And it doesn't really sound any like dynamically different. It's still got all the dynamics, just louder. So this limiter is absolutely fire. So that's essentially limiting in a nutshell. So limiting is good for basses. So let's say we do like a crazy bass sound design deal, and now we don't want to clip it. We just want to make sure that it's not going over and causing distortion. That would be a good time to use a limiter. So like if we had like something like this, let's say like we're doing some stuff and now we're clipping. So let's do like an OTT. So you can see down here we're in the red. So if we just toss a limiter on here, now it's just doing the reduction necessary to keep this from not redlining down here. At the end of like a sub bass. So yeah, a limiter is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It just limits sounds from going over by basically turning them down once they reach the threshold, turning them down completely. Now we're going to talk about clippers. So this is where things get a little bit different. One of my favorite is K-clips. So Ableton doesn't unfortunately have like a baked in clipper, but there are some really good ones for free or cheap. This one I think is like 30 bucks. And this one's cool because we can crank it into the clipper and get the effect, and then we can reduce the outputs. We don't actually want it to be that loud. We're just trying to pick up that aesthetic from it. So we're getting all that distortion from the clipping up here. So basically these waveforms are like sawed off as soon as they hit 0. And it's not redlining or anything. It's just because we clipped it so hard, it's being perceived as being so loud. So this is like the opposite of the kind of track that we would actually want to clip, but that's kind of like the aesthetic or the sound we get. Let's grab like a, here we go. Here's a liney demo. This would be a good one to clip. So that's not clipped. It's almost got like a saturation on it now. Yeah, a lot louder. It's got that grit. It's got that color. So in something like this, like trap, bass, dubstep, this like heavy clipping can actually sound super dope. And another good one is Knock Clipper. So this is Decap's clipper from his Knock unit. This one's cool because it actually gives you the waveform, so you can actually see what you're doing to your audio. Just clipping it like this. And you could change how soft or hard it is. So that's another thing. Soft or hard clipping is basically just how aggressive this curve is. And when you clip drums, because the transient is staying at the top for such a longer time, it really makes your drums kind of like bang, makes them like hit a lot harder because it's louder for a longer period of time in your timeline. And then certain Ableton devices have soft clippers built in. So it's basically like this glue compressor has a soft clipper built in. So if we go overboard with the makeup gain, the compression, it'll soft clip it for us, which is nice. So to kind of reiterate, limiting is great for making sure sounds don't go over 0. It's great for transparently making stuff louder. Whereas a clipper is doing a little bit of degrading to the waveform, actually. It's giving it more grit, it's giving it more loudness, a little bit of color, different tools for different circumstances. So I hope this gave you guys a good overview of limiting versus clipping. You know, get in there and play and listen for the sound of a limiter. Ableton stock limiter colors stuff a little bit, so I might stay away from that one if possible. And yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next module.